rate at which people are coming into the room has slowed considerably. So let me offer my welcome to everybody today. And thanks for all that the whole campus has done, faculty, staff, and our newly arriving students to get ready for the fall semester. It feels different this year than it did last year or the year before. And I have high hopes that the sense of connection and togetherness can continue to grow on the campus as we emerge from, can I say that, emerge from the pandemic? Of course, we don't know what's going to happen with the pandemic. We'll pay close attention to health and safety issues, but it sure feels different. The vibrancy of the campus is just absolutely extraordinary. Let me just thank everybody for their preparation, getting the semester started, just the final course prep and just getting technology working and people moving into new buildings and moving around the campus. I know the tax it takes on you, but this is all intended to give our students the best experience possible. Speaking of our students, let's make sure we focus on their well-being. There was a new initiative that was just launched through student government and through the Division of Student Affairs, called the Bandana Project, or the Green Bandana Project. And this is students looking out for one another. It's a mental health and suicide awareness program where students, you'll see it on campus, wear green bandanas because they've been through a training program to prepare them for outreach to others who might be suffering issues with regard to suicidal ideation or mental health. And we're not making them counselors, but we're making them a support system where they can point others to the help that they might need. So it's a great example of members of our campus looking out for one another and lifting each other up. And so I thank all those. I think we've done about over 300 students in this program, and it's just an extraordinary opportunity. But those are examples of ways that we can make UND just a better place for each of us. And so as we think about the human connection and what it means to be part of our institution and how we support it, I think initiatives like that really matter. Let me thank all the folks who have been actively working on our strategic plan. You're going to hear in a minute from Jim Machorik and Lynette Krenelka, who chair that committee, and just the extraordinary work. We've had literally hundreds and hundreds of people supporting the effort, and it's been extraordinary. I know they'll share the mission, the draft mission, or at least the ideas that went behind the draft mission, vision, and core value statements. And we're getting close to the next phase, and it's really exciting to watch the work of the committee unfold as it has. I'm really extraordinarily proud of those two, but all of the people involved in the committee. Thanks also to, we're preparing for our Higher Learning Commission accreditation coming up. And the team has been working on drafting it's called the assurance argument. It's essentially the self-study. And I really appreciate all the efforts led out of the provost's office, but members across the campus to support the efforts there. I know that there will be questions, of course. We had recently announced and worked with our Native American faculty and staff members and students yesterday to make an announcement about repatriation efforts. The public release will happen later. Later, so right after this session, there'll be a statement from me to you, campus members, about our efforts on repatriation of Native American artifacts. And it's important. You want to pay close attention to it because this is serious and heartfelt work that there's a great committee of people who have put their hearts and souls into honoring and respecting Native American culture and Native American ancestors as well. So, and the press is already reporting on this. So it's now out, and we have a press conference, an official press conference at 2 p.m. today that you can tune into as well. But what I'll do is I'll give more information on that later on in this session. But first, we'll talk strategic planning. We'll take questions on areas that are of interest to the campus. Melanie Linder, Vice President Linder, is going to come in and moderate this and do an excellent job like she always does. And then we'll get to the news of the day with regard to repatriation and to answer your questions at that point. So let me turn it over to Vice President Linder. Melanie, good to see you.
Thank you, President. Good to see you too, President Armacost, and thank you for everyone who's joined us today. I just want to remind everyone who's on the Zoom call that if you would submit your questions in the Q&A section, we'll call them up and pass them along to our experts that are on the panelists. And while you're doing that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim and Lynette now, who are going to give an update on where we are with the strategic plan. So Jim and Lynette.
Okay, thanks. So, as many of you will have heard, it's been a pretty busy summer for those involved in the strategic planning process. Since the last time that we addressed the UND community back in April, the SBC and its 7 work groups, comprising over 200 people, continued its work reaching out to student and faculty groups for input on the way ahead for UND. There was a huge flurry of activity near the end of the semester as we attempted to reach out to as many faculty and student groups as possible before the semester ended. But once the semester did end, the focus shifted. From late May until August, the SBC and its 7 work groups conducted approximately 50 focus groups or listening sessions, primarily with staff and community folks. And in this sense, when we're talking about community, it's a very, very broadly construed term. This includes alumni, strategic partners, and various interested parties, state, nation, and even worldwide. For those of you who may be interested, all of the notes from the focus groups, plus the results of our surveys and other information gathering activities are included under resources on our strategic planning website. Now, based upon the information that was gathered, by the end of July, the work groups produced preliminary reports that listed key priorities and recommendations within each of the 7 themes that they had been assigned by the SBC. In the meantime, the Strategic Planning Committee itself was busy working on first drafts of mission, vision, and core value statements. At this point, the SBC and its indefatigable support folks, Anna Clark and Rob Carolyn, plus the Communications Subcommittee, brought all this material together and distributed to over 70 UND leaders, administrators, faculty, staff, and students in preparation for a half-day retreat/workshop session. This was held right here on campus on August the 9th. We're nothing if not cost effective. We're very good at keeping within budget. At this event, the assembled leaders had the opportunity to hear the co-captains of each work group and the co-chairs of the SBC briefly summarize their group's preliminary findings and recommendations. More importantly, in a process that some of us liken to speed dating, the participants were broken down into 8 smaller pods, visited with representatives of each work group and of the SBC so that they could provide their individual and collective feedback on what had been produced to date. All of this, plus individual table report outs, was recorded so that we would have yet another source of data when we went back to the drawing board, as we knew we were going to have to. This retreat, although a bit stressful for those involved, although I have to admit, it was somewhat enjoyable to exert a heavy-handed discipline over senior administrators who weren't sticking to our strict timelines for table swapping, but this retreat was particularly useful for us. The feedback received has been of great value as the SBC redrafted and refined the mission, vision, and core value statements. The work groups, all of which have been incredible in meeting their deadlines, have just now, in fact today, are in the process of submitting their finalized reports to us on the SBC. Reports that have incorporated and or addressed many of the concerns raised at the retreat. 4 of them have already come in. They're excellent. At the beginning of this week, the Strategic Planning Committee co-chairs presented the latest versions of the mission, vision, and core value statements to the President's Executive Council. And we are very pleased to report that the reception was quite positive. So we're getting very close to a draft of these that will be ready for broader circulation and critique. And Lynette will tell you a little bit more about that later. And now that we have the final reports of the work groups, or almost all of them in hand, over the next few weeks, the Strategic Planning Committee is going to be producing a full draft of the document that we're now thinking of as UND's strategic vision for moving forward, tentatively entitled UND Empowers Action. It's going to be a draft that we can take before the larger UND community for additional feedback and reaction this coming fall.
All right, thanks, Jim. The person hours that has been put into this process is just quite staggering. I don't even know how many hundreds of hours. The work groups were well organized by our co-captains and proved to be extremely diligent in carrying out their work. Indeed, the efforts of work group and SPC members to gather input, listen to the concerns and ideas of diverse stakeholders, and bring all of this together in coherent form have been absolutely remarkable. And although we've just received the final reports, as Jim was saying, of the work groups, based upon their preliminary reports and list of priorities, the SPC has commenced the process of identifying some of the foundations or core pillars, core principles, pillars of our strategic plan. So this brings us to a very important point. As we have emphasized from the outset, although we've had 7 distinct work groups, we did not see these as necessarily becoming their own separate foundational categories or priorities of UND strategic vision for the future. Best practice really tells us that we would have between 3 to 5, and that's really what we're coming up with. So the 5 potential foundational categories are learning, discovery, service, belonging or a sense of belonging, and then diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and justice as its own. So as we said, these are tentative right now. There's been a lively debate, even amongst Jim and I, amongst the committee, amongst many individuals, as to whether DEIAJ should be its own foundational category, or should it be infused in everything we do? Well, we've come to the conclusion that it really is both. It needs to be both. So as we collate all the priorities and final recommendations of the work groups, we will most certainly decide upon different words that we'll use to describe our foundational categories of our vision for UND's future. Tomorrow, our strategic planning committee will be working at taking the priorities and themes from the work group reports and putting them into these foundational categories that we've come up with. Again, these are just in draft form. But to be honest, we're still at such a preliminary stage that we're not going to say anything more about the themes and all of the work a lot of the work that's been done. So where do we go from here? Well, we are going to be releasing the draft mission, vision, and core values even as early as next week. And we'll have a survey also that goes along with that. So we're still in the collecting feedback stage. September will be a month, really a full month of writing the draft UND strategic vision. Again, not only including the mission, vision, core values, but those foundational categories, action and priorities that will go under each of those categories. So we really want to start getting public comment on a lot of the work that's been happening. October is going to be spent gathering feedback on the proposed plan through surveys, town halls, public forums. November will most certainly see us rewriting
some more.
revising, redrafting, and gathering even more feedback, while December will be spent finalizing everything. So we are well aware that not all of the information and its insights gathered over the course of this lengthy process will be able to fit within our 10 to 15 page strategic vision document. So in addition to all of our work product being made available on our website, Jim and I know that a supplemental document will be needed and prepared by our strategic planning committee so that the great work that has been done is not going to be lost. More to the point, this supplemental report will allow us to make certain that priorities that do not make it into the front end of this ongoing and evolving strategic vision will be slotted in for the future, a reservoir, so to speak, of strategic initiatives that need to be addressed as we continue to move forward. So our goal is to have a strategic vision document for President Armacost at the end of December. That's our update.
All right, thanks, Jim and Lynette. Appreciate that. We're going to move into the questions which have started coming in while you were giving that brief. All right. Andy, I think you were going to answer some questions regarding the shift to the repatriation news of that. So I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Yeah, there was one comment in the chat about the insensitivity of proceeding business as normal. Please know that this town hall had been scheduled. We didn't know that news media would pick up the conversations that we started yesterday with our Indigenous students, faculty, and staff member, although you might say it was likely they were going to pick it up. I agree with whoever wrote the note, anonymous attendee, and I appreciate you having the courage to levy your criticism. With that, what I'm going to do is shift immediately to the important matter of the day that some of you have heard of, not all of you have. And I apologize to the members of my team who have joined, who might have thought you were going to answer questions, but you might not now. My deeper apologies go to anyone who was offended by this layout. I do appreciate Jim and Lynette giving a quick overview of the strategy planning process that's happening. That's valuable information. Everything else today pales in comparison to what I will share with you. Please accept to any Indigenous members on this call, accept my apology on behalf of the university for the news that I'm about to share with you. It centers around repatriation of Native American artifacts. This work began in earnest, at least with our current committee, which comprises Indigenous and non-Indigenous members, a group of about a dozen or so members from across the campus who unknowingly got pulled into this work. The committee was formed to address general repatriation policy issues for the campus, and then around late February, early March, came to the realization as they were looking for Native American artifacts, found remains of Native American ancestors, and these in the culture are known to be ancestors. All in all, over the course of several months, the total number of ancestors can be measured in the dozens. And what we're talking about are an ancestor could be a single piece of bone, bony fragments. It could be a bone. It could be multiple bones. But any skeletal remains of an ancestor is considered to be an ancestor. And so we're talking several dozen. We don't have an exact count. In addition, there are sacred artifacts and funerary items and other items of cultural significance. And the total number there is probably about 250 boxes worth, like moving boxes worth of those items, including ancestral remains or ancestors. And the pain that you hear from our Indigenous colleagues who were involved in this is real, it's deep. And I don't know, I'm going to ask our UIT moderator, Va'afu Swenga, I don't know if you can pull up Lane Lyons, Doug McDonald, and Crystal Alberts to join us as panelists. But they might have some additional thoughts, or at least give them the microphone, the ability to turn on their mic. So since the very moment we realized we had ancestors on our campus, we began working with tribal leadership. And so key tribal representatives, we made many phone calls. We have been working with about 15 or so tribal representatives from various tribes. We felt it was so important to have them guide us, simply because processes like this often put Native Americans last. There are many cases of repatriation where the absolute last group of people to know are members of tribal nations. And the committee made recommendations to me, and they felt it was so important to make certain that tribes were placed first in the process. And so this delicate work of conveying our apologies, conveying the pain that our campus Indigenous members face and feel, we wanted to make sure that they had information about what the university was facing, and most importantly, to receive our apologies for mistakes that the university had made in repatriating the ancestors. So it's a significant amount of work that lays ahead of us. It's probably going to take 2 to 3 years to complete the repatriation. We're going to do it alongside the tribal representatives and in conjunction with tribal customs and courtesies. We have a cultural resources management team that we're on the verge of bringing aboard officially to support these efforts. And it's a Native American owned firm that will allow us to do this work with respect. The most important thing I can convey to members of the campus is the deep sense of sadness that I personally feel, and that we, the members of the UND community, should feel in this case, to acknowledge the mistakes that have been made, to pledge our support to tribal nation members and leaders and spiritual leaders, historic officers. We owe them our support, and most importantly, we owe them the commitment that the university is going to take this to the completion, and that we're going to make sure that all ancestors are returned home as quickly as possible. I did see Lane Lyons pop up on my screen. So Lane is a development officer at the UND Alumni Association and Foundation. She co-chairs our repatriation committee, and I'll allow her to say a few words. Lane, I know this was not expected to be in this forum, but I really am grateful for you being here. And I know the members who have signed in will appreciate hearing your journey with repatriation.
Thanks, President Armacost. For those who don't know me, my name is Lane Lyons. I am an enrolled member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Indians located in Belcourt, North Dakota. I am a development officer at the foundation. I got brought into this because of a collection that we had that had Native American artifacts, specifically headdresses or war bonnets, moccasins, beadwork, dresses, stuff of that nature. And that was last November 18th, 2021. From that timeline, myself and the other committee members, specifically Crystal Alberts, Sarah Heitkamp, began digging deeper into what UND had, because no one really seemed to officially know what artifacts that there were, why they were here, who got them, that kind of stuff. So there's going to be a little bit of a time lapse in my way of explaining this, but from November to March, we were working on policies of how we accept certain things, how we care for certain things, where they're at, stuff like that. On March 3rd, 2022, Sarah Heitkamp and Crystal Alberts had discovered in a space, discovered a ceremonial pipe and immediately said, we're not touching that. And I received a call to help with cultural protocols. At that time, I didn't feel comfortable doing it by myself. So I called Dr. Donald Warren and Dr. Allison Kelleher from Indigenous Health and InMed to come over and help me with that. So with the removal of that pipe, we did smudging, we did other cultural protocols, and we removed it from that space. We were in that space and we knew of another space that was near. So we said, let's just go look, because we knew there was a high chance that there'd be other artifacts. So while looking through that space, there was an area that we decided to look into, and there was shelves on a back wall. And Dr. Don Warren came across a box that he had recognized the words on it. What was it? When we opened it, that's when the first set of ancestral remains were found. So that really hurt. That was between 12:30 and 1:30 p.m. that day. It was immediate that we knew we had a bigger problem and that we were one of those institutions that didn't do the right thing. So we shut down that space. We notified other committee members. We notified UND administration. And that's when we began the work. Crystal Alberts and other members were working on kind of the fact finding of paperwork, different state agencies, trying to get more information about different things. Myself and President Armacost were on the other side of things. As he mentioned, we were very vocal and intentional about the process and how we wanted to go about this. And it all was related to many of the committee members were students here and Native, and it wasn't always great. And it was oftentimes hard to be a student here and to find out about anything having to do with you to be the last person. And that's not what we wanted. So throughout this process, we have involved many tribal partners. And I want to be very clear. I will not be saying spaces. I will not be saying names, our partners, because we are trying to protect people who asked us to protect them. They are our partners, and we're being respectful of that relationship. So I won't be saying spaces. I won't be saying names. But I've been on every phone call with President Armacost or meeting with the individuals we have spoke with, and they were angry, they were sad, frustrated, confused, but they were also appreciative of the process that we are going through and how we're doing this. Because like other institutions that you look up do not do it this way. I don't know that anyone that has done it this way. They typically go through the repatriation process, they do an inventory, and then they release a final result, and they basically hand it over to tribes to take care of. And that doesn't feel great. And for those who don't know what repatriation is, it's a process of returning typically Native American artifacts and human remains through a process. So you do inventory, you do where they came from, what are they, who are they, that kind of stuff. That's what repatriation is. And there's a federal law called NAGPRA, which is the Native American Graves Protection Act, that went into place 1990, which all institutions were supposed to comply with, and most have not. So that's what the process is. But I've been on every phone call with President Armacost telling people about our findings. And again, they are appreciative of how we're going about this because it is not the norm. And I want to stress that is our committee, myself, we are proud of the work that we are doing, although it hurts. We're proud of that work because it's different and it was led by Natives. So that's kind of how we got to where we are. I've seen some different things about information. I just want to say they were found in spaces. I'm not going to tell you where, I'm not going to say exactly again, but they were found in spaces. I don't want misinformation out there unless you hear it from us. There are dozens. We can't be exact about how many there are. We can't be exact about anything, as President Armacost said, because we're just starting this process. This isn't the end, this is the beginning. And as we go through this, we will be as transparent as we possibly can, because that's important to us, and to involve our Indigenous communities, because that's the people who will hurt the most from this, and deserve answers. So if that answers most of it.
There was a natural question as well, and Melanie, I'm sorry, I'm just jumping right in, about why was nothing done sooner? And I think Lane gave a nice explanation about the relationship that the committee has tried to build with tribal leadership, and to make sure that we follow their wishes and their pace. And we did, it took a while to get there, but we did welcome a group to campus during the week of August 8th. To bless spaces on campus and to move the ancestors and these sacred items to a single location on campus, so that the repatriation work could begin in earnest in a single location that's safe and away from the hustle bustle of the main part of the campus. At that meeting with the tribal representatives, we talked about things like, when can we start sharing this more broadly? And there's naturally a reservation, because this is very private, personal, and emotional work. And if we had our ways, doing it in private would probably be how many of the tribal representatives would want us to do it. But we felt it was important, first and foremost, to speak with the Indigenous members of the campus, our Native American faculty and staff first yesterday, and then our students later in the afternoon. and then share it more openly with the campus. The release about this news was scheduled for 1 o'clock right after this meeting. But of course, as I mentioned before, the news of the repatriation efforts is now public. This is not, we haven't been slow rolling anything. There's been thousands of hours of work happening behind the scenes by the committee. It just had to be done in private before we were at the point of sharing it more broadly. If that offends anyone, I accept my apologies for that. It just, the committee, who I listen to very carefully, we debate this, right? And the committee debates it. But what's first and foremost on their minds is the well-being of the students, faculty, and staff on the campus, sharing the information appropriately. And most importantly is deferring to the tribes in this very sacred process of bringing the ancestors home.
All right, President Armacost, Lane, we continue to get questions coming in. I'm going to throw them over to your way to respond. But before we do that, I just want to share with those watching that we do have a university website regarding our repatriation efforts that is now live. You can find it at und.edu/about/president/repatriation. So it's under the Office of the President's website. There you'll find the university statement. You'll find the summary of what we know today, answers to frequently asked questions that the committee has been getting and anticipating, and an opportunity to submit other questions via email as they come to you. So just making everyone aware of that. President Armacost, one of the questions that's come in while you were speaking was, can you address what UND will do for reparations for all of our current and historic harm our university has done to First Nation, Indigenous, and American Indian people?
It's a wonderful question. It naturally follows on from this tragic news. That will be an ongoing discussion. And I think that's a discussion not just here at UND, but also across the state and the North Dakota University system. Please know that we have had discussions even prior to this, this news, prior to November, about ways to restore support systems on the campus to our Native American students. The budget cuts of a number of years ago removed key positions on our campus that provided vital services to our American Indian students. And we've taken the step of restoring the position and are about to hire a new director of the American Indian Center, and there'll be subsequent positions that are added to provide support to that director. That in a sense is getting us back to where we were, but it's an important step for the university to put resources forward to make sure that the needs, not just the academic needs, but the cultural and social needs of our American Indian students are taken care of. And so we also will put forward proposals for expansion of scholarships for Native American students. And of course, we'll work with the North Dakota University system, and but there's a process to do that. But immediately, and in fact, before any of this news broke, we had made a commitment for the restoration of those services through the American Indian Center. Those are just a few examples.
Thank you, President Armacost. Another question that came in was stating that the announcement regarding the discovery of human remains, ancestral remains, they're wondering if the Grand Forks County Coroner's Office has been advised of this situation.
I don't believe they have. The State Historic and Preservation Office is well aware, and other federal officials are well aware. I'm unfamiliar that reporting to the coroner's office is a requirement, but we'll examine that, and if we will certainly let them know. That's an easy enough thing for us to make sure for completeness that they're aware as well. Thank you for the suggestion.
Another question that's come up, President Armacost, or given the current events and the history of on our campus, what steps will UND be taking to engage action regarding the Ralph Engelstad Arena and the selling of Sioux items.
Right, this is an ongoing discussion on the campus. I'm not going to address it fully here. I think we could have a whole session about that background. The Ralph Engelstad Arena, of course, has been a good partner with us in terms of providing a first-class facility for hockey and other sports. Many members of the campus have raised the concern about the widespread use of the old Sioux logo in that facility. In addition, the sale of products that bear the Sioux logo is complicated by copyright issues and trademark issues, and an agreement that was set forth between the NCAA and UND, where UND is required to sustain some level of commerce on that old trademark. If we were not to do that, the trademark would enter the public domain, and what would likely happen is even wider spread usage of the old logo. So know that the university's in a position of balancing how do you limit a logo that we no longer ascribe to or that is ours, and how do you balance that with kind of a desire to limit the distribution of that mark. It's really the trademark law and the intellectual property law, we feel puts us in an interesting position. However, I am open to the conversation about whether or not we abandon the trademark completely. The second order consequences of that might not be what we want, though. And so this is a question really that I'll hear from the campus on, I'm sure, over the next few weeks or the next probably few hours as well.
Next question, President Armacost. How did we determine why the remains are located on our campus?
How did we determine why they're on our campus? So the university has a long history of archaeological and anthropological research. In fact, we had a Department of Anthropology that existed until a few years ago. The nature of the work of archaeologists has historically been the examination of fossils, human remains, artifacts, and when you have a department that engages in that type of work, there, at least in 1990, when the federal law was enacted, there was an expectation that everything would be returned to tribal lands. There is evidence that we did engage in repatriation of some items on our campus. We don't know the extent, but what remains, of course, is troubling. What we believe is that the items that we have on campus come from the 1940s, the 1960s, the 1970s, and the 1980s. Why we didn't know about them, or why nobody had taken the action to repatriate, we don't know. And our job right now, first and foremost, is to make sure we bring the ancestors home. And at the same time, or subsequently, to determine what actions did the university or individuals do to put us in this situation. And that's going to be a complicated question to answer. How did we get here? And but again, our first priority is to make sure that we get the ancestors and the sacred artifacts back home to tribal lands.
President Armacost and VP Nguyen, there was a question about the land acknowledgement and can a land acknowledgement statement be drafted for our other campuses in Fargo, Bismarck, and Minot? Would you like to address that?
I'd be happy to. I think it's a wonderful idea. But I know that it would probably be in conjunction with the development of land acknowledgement statements by the other universities who might be co-located in those cities. Josh, you might have some additional thoughts on what the School of Medicine and Health Sciences is doing, if anything, with regard to this?
Well, so I think everyone knows that the School of Medicine and Health Sciences operates 3 regional campuses, as indicated in Fargo, Bismarck, and Minot, and they're part of UND. Therefore, I would say UND's land acknowledgement statement clearly applies to those locales as well. And if further steps are necessary, we would take our direction from President Armacost. But they are part of the university and therefore fully support and endorse the current extant UND statement about land acknowledgement. It applies to them as well, as since they're part of the university.
Yeah, and the tricky part is, I know there was a lot of work that was put into understanding the history of the lands and which peoples were actually inhabiting the land. And it could be that geographically, Minot had a different long history of who was there. And so I think the work is going to require some examination of that long history. And we had a great committee that did it for Grand Forks and UND. And either that committee, or again, there could be committees at universities at Minot State or Bismarck State that are looking at this, that know that intricacy of the lineage of people who inhabited the land. I think that's an important piece as well. Hey, I know that I'm not going to shut this down yet, but this news is tough news. Again, particularly for our Native American colleagues who might be hearing this for the first time. Please know that over at the American Indian Center, Keith Malater is there to provide any kind of support or lending an ear. There's smudging opportunities over there as well. Professor Doug McDonald, who runs Inside the Indians into Psychology program, also is reachable. And the release that just came out or is coming out in 17 minutes or so, we'll have a listing of all those resources that are available. And then, of course, we have our employee assistance program that's available for all employees, the online system to support. So a number of resources are available. And I just want people to feel not alone and encourage you, if you're struggling, to bind together with others who have the same struggles and really seek these resources together.
And those resources are also listed on our repatriation website too, as well. The next question, I think, goes to Deanna Carlson-Zink. And the question is, would the UND Alumni Association and Foundation rename the Sioux Awards to the Distinguished Alumni Awards or other appropriate name? Deanna, would you like to respond to that? We might be having some technical issues. President Armacost, would you like to address that issue?
I will. So in order to recognize that very concern, the Sioux Award is no longer known as the Sioux Award. And what I will let you know about might be slightly more satisfying, but maybe not completely so. It's the Sioux Award for Distinguished Alumni Service and Leadership. So in adding that extra bit to it, I think the executive board or the board for the UND Alumni Association and Foundation recognized that it's important to add to the title of the award what's important about the award, and that's the distinguished service of the alumni. So it gets exactly to the heart of your suggestion. And the board will at some point probably consider future ideas that come before them. And again, I don't know if Deanna's on, but I think the board felt like this was a way to honor the legacy of the award, but emphasize the contributions of the people who were receiving the award. And I attended the award ceremony last year. What really, of course, surprised me was virtually none. I think there was one member who said, "Thank you for the Sioux Award." What they said was, "Thank you to the university for recognizing this hard work, service, and leadership that I've hoped to model for others." And so when you hear those words to the recipients of the award, it's not about the Sioux name. It's about what the honor means to them. And I know Deanna just popped up, so I'll turn it over to her. But again, the position of the foundation board was to recognize that there's a more descriptive way of recognizing what that honor meant. And again, for some, that might not be enough, and I recognize that, but this was a decision by the foundation board. Deanna.
Correct. So thank you, President Armacost. I think you stated it perfectly well in speaking for our board of directors and where they are right now. So looking at speaking more to what the award is, leadership, distinguishing service, dedication to the university. Those have always been the qualities of this award. You'll notice in our most recent Alumni magazine that some of you may have received this week or will be receiving, we're referring to it even as Alumni Honors, because we also are recognizing our Young Alumni Achievement Award winners. But the award at this point is still called the Sioux Award for Distinguished Leadership and Service. And it's an ongoing conversation within our board of directors. I will say, for as strong as some feel against the name of the award, there are those that feel equally as strong for the award. So it is something that we'll continue to have deep conversations with our board of directors.
And I will say that instances like we're talking about today, news of this repatriation, often ignite those conversations to continue. So hopefully there's a continuing discussion about the concerns that people feel they need to raise on not just logo issues, but all matters related to our support to Native American students, faculty, and staff.
So President Armacost, we have some questions about, maybe this is to Deanna and yourself to take to the board, but would we consider the Fighting Hawks Distinguished Alumni Award? And what is the rationale for keeping the Sioux name in there?
I think at this point, any name of the award would be considered. As I mentioned, the board of directors, we haven't had a specific conversation about it. We did, in fact, I had an executive committee call with our board of directors today, and there was some conversation around the name of the award and where we go from here. And this step of including leadership, distinguished leadership and service, is kind of a bridge to where we go from here moving forward. History is a big part of why it still is called the Sioux Award and where we have come from, but it's a different day. And there's a lot of new conversations that our board of directors will be a part of as they look at how we continue to honor alumni and friends and respect traditions and still do it in a way that respects all people and this university.
President Armacost, there was the question of, can there be additional town halls? I know that there was a town hall this morning at 9 o'clock with members of our Indigenous community. I think the question is referencing, can there be another town hall with a little more notice, since the notice for this morning's town hall was rather short?
Yes, absolutely. Our plan is to open up opportunities for conversation broadly and frequently. We know that there will be much sadness and sorrow over the coming weeks and months, and we need to provide forums to answer questions. and to give updates on the status of that we're making on repatriation. I think people also have to understand, I mentioned before, and I think Lane mentioned it as well, that this can be a 2 to 3 year process, and we're firmly committed to seeing it through. And whatever the expense is for us to make it happen, we will undertake. And if we have weekly meetings, the incremental change over week to week might not seem dramatic, but I assure you, over time, there will be a dramatic impact across our campus.
Deanna, I think the next question is for you, and that is, would the Alumni Association and Foundation consider reading the UND Alumni, the land acknowledgement statement at the awards banquet during homecoming?
Yes, I would say we would consider that. I'm trying to remember, we've also had conversations about, is it printed in the program as well? And we do have it on the land acknowledgement statement on our website as well. So we're using that in new ways. Andy?
Yeah,
yeah.
I chose to read it at summer commencement. It was not part of the script. So I added it on the fly. And I did it at the white coat ceremony for the School of Medicine. I think the following week or the next day, I forget what the timing was. And I felt it was an important way. When, you know, what struck me was, as you hear America the Beautiful sung by the singer, it talks about the beautiful land stretching from sea to shining sea. And I think, and it's called America the Beautiful, but before America existed, the same land was beautiful, and different people lived here. And I think it was important to, immediately after America the Beautiful, read the land acknowledgement statement. And I will guarantee you that I will read the land acknowledgement statement at the Sioux Awards. I would be honored to do so.
So it looks like a lot of the other comments in our Q&A are statements or suggestions of things that we can do going forward. President Armacost, is there anything you'd like to say? We're coming close to the end of time to close us out.
Yeah, this is, I've often talked about universities coming together on the hardest issues of the day. And I can't think of a harder issue, in particular for our American Indian students, faculty, and staff, than what we've just been talking about for the last 45 minutes. And know that the resources are here, know that the leadership of the institution will continue to advance the interests of our Native American students, to make sure that you have the support that you need to be successful at the University of North Dakota. And that's our obligation. So with that, let me sign off and wish you all a good day. The press conference will be at 2 p.m. I think the link, Melanie, if I'm not mistaken, is probably on the website, or where, if somebody wants to see the press conference will largely follow many of the topics, or most of the topics, that Lane and I just presented. The speakers will be myself, Lane, Professor Doug McDonald, and then our executive director of the Indian Affairs Commission, Nathan Davis. So the four of us will be the participants of that press conference, and we'll take the press's comments there. And I undoubtedely, I haven't seen the participation list, but my best guess is folks from the media have joined us on this call as well. So we will look forward to that engagement at 2 p.m. today.
So we can add the link to the repatriation website, so those individuals that are on this Zoom call who'd like to watch the press conference can do so.
Wonderful. Well, let me again say thanks to everyone, and we will talk soon.